You're listening to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.
And welcome back to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany. My name is Eric Hardiman, and I'm the co-host here of The Social Workers with Alyssa Lotmore. Welcome back, Alyssa.
Hey, Eric.
Okay, so today we're also excited for the second hour. We have with us a special guest here in the studio, Alix Foisy. Alix is a social worker and therapist here in the New York Capital Region, and she specializes in working with individuals who suffer from anxiety, those with chronic pain and illness, and older adults. She's also a local yoga teacher and social entrepreneur who provides education on the reduction of anxiety and the transition into retirement. She pairs the mind-body techniques of yoga with the acceptance and commitment therapy model to help clients address how they feel emotionally and physically and to make a solid commitment to their goals. So welcome, Alix. We're excited to have you here in the studio, and there's a lot to talk about, but welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Great.
So do you want to just tell us a little bit more about the work that you do? Because as we listen to your bio, that's quite a bit of things, areas that you touch on. Can you tell us how it all relates and how you got into doing this?
Yeah. So I do work as a therapist and also a yoga teacher, like Eric had said. And it is interesting, like, how does it all come together? But I do, it's really kind of my areas of interest. My specialty for a long time has been working with older adults. That's what I specialized in my master's program. But through the years, I've just seen so much crossover with, you know, what older adults are dealing with and what people who have chronic pain or chronic illness are dealing with. You really don't feel like an older person unless you're, you know, experiencing some kind of health condition that holds you back from doing your activities of daily living and engaging in life in a full and complete way. And then there's a lot of anxiety that comes with that because you're kind of transitioning into maybe a person who's older or a person who has chronic pain or chronic illness. And in that, in all my experiences, I've worked a lot with students and with sort of the younger emerging adulthood developmental stage. And they experience just a whole lot of anxiety, and for a variety of different reasons than I think other generations have. So I've kind of worked with emerging adults, worked with older adults, and then just everybody in between.
Interesting. So maybe let's back up a little bit, and if you could tell us a little bit about your journey into social work and sort of what got you connected to this profession. How did you find out about the profession, and what, you know, was sort of the draw for you originally?
Well, originally, throughout my life, people have always told me I should go into this field. And obviously I said, well, no, I don't want to do that. That wouldn't be a good idea. But I think I just have a natural skill set for working with people. And for some reason, I just didn't see it for a while. But after my undergraduate degree, I took some time. I wanted to work and get some work experience and see what it was that I really liked to do. And then I ended up working at the University of Michigan. I'm originally from Michigan. And while I was there, I worked with, you know, in higher education, it's, you know, you have the access to take courses and kind of explore a little bit more. And so I was encouraged to do that. And I was like, well, you know, everybody's been telling me that I should be a social worker, so why don't I take a few classes and see if it's a good fit? And I really enjoyed the classes that I was taking and decided to pursue it further. At the time, I had been working on the health and retirement study at the Institute for Social Research. And although I think research is very valuable, I felt like I was really just doing a lot of computer work, and I had a deep desire to connect with people and to collaborate with people and be kind of face-to-face. And social work was a great avenue for me to do that.
It's one of the beauties of social work. We were just talking about it with Dean Warner before this, was that social work is about doing, and it's about, you know, being in the community and connecting with people and being a change agent, and not just learning through sitting in a classroom, but also experiential learning and learning in agency settings and helping real life people.
Yes, it's important.
So I guess, you know, while we're talking about real life, maybe talk a little bit about, if you would, about how you incorporate the mind and body into your work, and sort of what your views are on mind-body concepts, I guess.
Sure. Well, for several years I worked in the field. I did a lot of kind of frontline social work, working in healthcare, working in community programs, and I really enjoyed it, but I did feel like there was a piece that was missing. And, you know, if you work in talk therapy, you're talking things out, and I felt that was somewhat limited in the sense that I was realizing, especially working with people who have chronic pain, chronic illness, that there's an emotional component to chronic pain and chronic illness that can't really be reached. It's through words. It's a felt sense, and we aren't always able to really express it through words or heal it through words. And there is a component of action, like what action can we take to address emotions that might be trapped in the body, or we have daily stressors that we hold. Like if somebody feels fear quite frequently, they might feel that in their neck and shoulders, and how can we address that in more ways than just sort of talking through it? So in 2013, I took a yoga teacher training that really did focus on how to have a relaxed neck, which might seem kind of silly, but it's really crucial because your neck contains all of the kind of cords, if you will, to other internal organs that, you know, are working without us really thinking. And so there's the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, and our culture really puts us into the sympathetic nervous system and doesn't allow us the ability to really rest and digest, whether that's, you know, what we're facing in our life or actual like food, and processing through that. And having a way for the body to feel truly relaxed, which is really important.
No, I have a question. You're talking a lot about the older adults and people as they're aging and going through chronic pain, but for the level of anxiety, so I have a 7-year-old, so I'm just thinking for children too, but sometimes there's more, just in today's world, sometimes there's more ways for kids to be anxious. Would something for like yoga and different practices, would that be any work with kids, or maybe not that you do, but do you see a lot of benefit for kids engaging in types of yoga, or just different ways to help them relax and find other outlets for stress when they can't always explain it?
Right. They may not have the language for it, but they do feel it.
Or they don't know what it is. They just like, oh, you know, my neck hurts, or I have a headache, but how do you really get down to addressing it?
Exactly. And one of the common complaints of children when they feel anxiety is that their stomach hurts. And sometimes it's dismissed, oh, you know, you just don't want to go to school, or you're nervous, you'll get over it. But we don't always know how can we address that actual pain, because it's tied to our emotions. I haven't done a whole lot of work with children, but the yoga class that I teach at Good Karma Studio on Sundays is a yoga for anxiety class. And one of the things in preparing for that class, I did some additional reading, and a lot of things came up that addressed how kids can deal with anxiety. And the suggestion is to do some cross-body activities. And so that could be something like a twist, or even kind of giving yourself a hug in a way by touching both of your shoulders and crossing the midline. Being aware of the midline. Even something as simple as kind of walking in a circle, then walking in a circle the other way. There's a lot of tools and resources online actually for children around this kind of idea of crossing the midline, and how we can have more body awareness that can really help to process the feeling without having to figure out how to get them to talk about it.
And social work, you know, for those listeners that are thinking about the connection to social work, at least from my understanding, limited understanding, is that it hasn't always been necessarily a natural fit with some of these physiological and sort of physical elements to someone's life. I mean, we think of social work as talk therapy, or helping through policy work, or helping through quote-unquote interventions, social work interventions. But part of what I'm hearing you say is that there's a physical component to health and wellness. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that maybe there's a role for social work increasingly in the future to think about that connection of the physical in terms of how people are doing in their lives.
Exactly. I agree. And I think there can be a lot of exploration also around, I mean, social work is really deeply rooted in person and environment. And if we look at the environmental factors involved in where people live and where people work, we know that, there's toxic pollution in our environment that could also have an effect on our body, which then also has an effect on our mind. Right. So taking a look at, where does someone live and what does their environment look like? Or if you're someone who does go out into the field, taking that into consideration and maybe advocating for people on that environmental piece as well could be helpful.
Great. So if you've just tuned in, you're listening to the Social Workers Live Radio Talk Show, and our guest here in the studio today is Alix Foisy. She's a social worker, therapist, and yoga teacher here in the Albany area. And I guess, as a next set of questions, I'm going to segue, and I can't find a good way to do this, but I'm really curious about your interest in social entrepreneurship. And it may or may not relate to what we've just talked about, so the segue, again, may not be natural. But I'm curious to sort of, for listeners, what can you define for us what social entrepreneurship means? Sure. And then sort of what's its importance to you?
Well, to me, social entrepreneurship is any business, even if it's something people do on their weekends and evenings and weekends, or if it's something that they're deeply committed to as the forefront of their work, is really just a business that's focused on a social justice issue where they're looking to solve something in society or in their community or with individuals where they can be one-on-one with their clients and not really have the interface of an organization that, like a nonprofit, is looking to meet their vision, and they have funders and there's grantees, and you have to really meet the needs of the people who are funding your organization, meet the needs of the organization itself, and then also work in who you're working with. And there's this idea of nonprofits of not really needing or wanting to make money. And social entrepreneurship, in a social entrepreneurship business, you have no issue with making money. You're very happy about making money because it's a way to empower both yourself and the people that you're working with. Because I think sometimes what social workers can do is inspire people by what they're doing, and they can also help people to find that in their own life, find that economic justice in their own life, and maybe that's the vision of their business. For me, my vision is really to be a disruptor in the health and mental health service industry or the healthcare system, because even just recently, I've had clients who haven't been able to continue working with me because their organization chose a different insurance, and that I'm not able to accept that insurance. Right. Or the deductible is so high that it prevents people from getting mental health treatment, because part of why they want to go and work with a counselor is because they're under a lot of fiscal distress. Right. And then that is just compounded by these high deductibles. And is there a way to work with people in a creative fashion so that you don't have to work under the conditions that insurance companies create, where they say, no, you can only meet with someone for 50 minutes. Well, what if I want to talk with someone for 2 hours? And what if that would be the most helpful way to help them work through mental health issues in their life? Right. And if you can find a way around that and be creative, then, why not create something that really meets the needs of your clients and be so client focused that you can use that just to further what you're doing. And I do think it's really related, because for a long time, I had heard that you really can't even talk about mind-body issues, or you can't offer a yoga pose to somebody who has chronic pain. You have to just do talk therapy, and that you would never want to put something like that in your notes because the insurance company wouldn't cover it. Whereas now we know, and some of the most popular people and the leaders in the mental health field are writing books about meditation and mindfulness, and how this really changes the brain, and that we can use neuroplasticity to help people heal from trauma, depression, anxiety, and a whole host of other issues going on.
So there's a lot in what you said. There's a lot to unpack, and we could probably spend hours talking about any of those subjects. But I guess I want to go back for a second to the entrepreneurship idea. And, sometimes in social workers typically work in nonprofit organizations or work for the state. They work for the government, work for county mental health, work for, a nonprofit hospital, work for health, sometimes for healthcare systems. But I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the possible tensions between that the profession's history and sort of the nonprofit realm and the more capitalist or semi-capitalist sort of notions of entrepreneurship, which people might think of Shark Tank, and they might think of the sort of profit-driven motive as being not always perceived as consonant with social work ideals and values. So it's a convoluted question, but I guess I'm wondering if you could talk about some of those tensions.
Sure. You're going to get me into trouble here because, I have worked in nonprofits, and there is a tension there because if you're on the front lines, you see what your clients need, and then you have to go back to your supervisors or to the administrators and explain what those needs are and really sell them on, we might need to do X, Y, and Z, and that might not be something that they're interested in funding.
Right.
So there is a real tension there. And for me, I had been working in a nonprofit around 2008 when there were a lot of financial distress just overall with nonprofits in general. And it just seemed like there was this notion that we want people to do more with less. Even if they did have a large capital fund that they could tap into, people, it seemed, were hesitant to do that. I was working in Chicago at the time, and I was pretty plugged into a lot of other nonprofits, and it just seemed that people were asked to work more and more and more, and were paid less and less and less. And the wages for social workers have been incredibly stagnant.
Yeah.
And how can we advocate for people who are in poverty if we are dangling by a thread almost there ourselves and not able to really take care of ourselves? And I think that's a major contributor to burnout in the social work field is that we're not valued financially, and we aren't always valued in the nonprofit setting. There are nonprofits that have social workers in administration, but I don't think there are as many as there could be. And so the voice of the social worker sometimes gets lost in the mix. I know I've often been the lone social worker in an organization, and I feel that we've drifted from our mission quite a bit in those settings where, and when you kind of bring that up, people are torn because they're indebted to the funders or the grantees, grant makers. We have to do X, Y, and Z because that's what they said. And I've even worked with funders who've said, well, I think that you should do X, Y, and Z in your program. And I'm like, I'm not sure what gives you the authority to think that would be appropriate. I'm the one who knows the most about my clients who I work with every day. So why am I not being included in these conversations? And then sometimes people are just saying, well, we need to meet, these kind of criteria in this certain program. And it's really hard to give pushback because being alone and being that lone voice is very isolating, and it can be quite scary.
So what makes social workers poised to lead as social entrepreneurs?
That's a great question, and I think that it's really in line getting back to the roots of social work. We have always been advocates for people living in poverty, and if we can create an organization where we can share those profits with our clients or provide services in a way where where it makes it more accessible to clients, then we're really meeting the mission of the social work profession in general. But I do think that social workers are poised to be social entrepreneurs because just in working with a lot of students over the years, they come into this field with a lot of passion, and they do have big, audacious goals that they want to meet, but then they end up in maybe nonprofits and get into this point of tension where they're really not sure how they can meet their audacious goals. And so just using the skills that we already have can be very helpful. when I talk to people about what I'm doing, a lot of social workers will say, well, that's great, but I don't know anything about business. And to me, I've done a lot of research in this over the years because this is an idea I've really held on to for several years and studied. And a business plan is essentially a marketing plan. And if you're a social worker, you are marketing all the time. If you're working with someone who's seriously depressed and you're trying to help them find a new framework for the way that they think about themselves and their life, that is marketing.
Right.
You know, we work with people who maybe are suicidal, and we're trying to help them find a way to create more meaning in their life and feel supported. And we're really, you know, working with someone on the edge there, and that is marketing. You know, it's really a very deep skill that social workers have, and I think we just need to reframe that for ourselves.
And yet marketing is a concept that's sometimes uncomfortable for social workers,
Yes.
that maybe they feel like is a dirty word, and, you know, something that as social workers they should not be active in marketing, because that's a business profit-driven kind of idea. So there's really interesting concepts here. And one of the things I really liked about what you said, Alix, was, see if I'll get the phrasing right, audacious thinking. And I know when working with social work students, that's one of the things that we try and really emphasize at the school is, yes, you may go into an organizational setting as a social worker and work in an agency that's traditional and has a structure, but you have the ability as a social worker to think outside of that box, and you have the ability to be innovative and creative and really to think audaciously, as you put it. And I really like that, because I think social work is a profession that needs to reconnect a bit with its big picture innovation, rather than just plugging away and doing hard work, although I think that's valuable.
Sure.
I think there's more that the profession could do to, you know, to be creative and innovative and audacious.
Exactly, yes. And I think we're really at a point in our society where people really want to move toward those audacious goals, and they're ready for them. And if we can just find a way to fund ourselves, then we would be able to break free from the constraints of different organizations. And not to say that they're you know, bad organizations. They're not. They do want to serve people. I think most people in healthcare also have very good intentions. It's just that we prioritize profits over people. And in a social entrepreneurship, you're prioritizing the person first, but also thinking, how can I balance the need to pay my own bills and eat and all of those good things, and meet the needs of my clients in a way where it's really visionary and really inspiring.
So how can social entrepreneurs change the field of social work and also solve systemic issues? Because this is sort of a different way of thinking. You know, we really don't. I've never really had a conversation like this about how social workers can sort of break away and do their own type of things and market. So how do you think this would change, this way of thinking, if more social workers thought like this? What do you think could be the difference, the impact?
I think the impact would be substantial, and I think it would help us to break free and create a different way of doing things that not only gets back to our roots, but really doubles down on those roots and helps us to be in community with the people that we're working with, so they're a part of not only the process but also the outcome, and to really celebrate those successes together. I think something that holds social workers back is sometimes we don't want to upset anybody, and we want everybody to be happy. I think that's sometimes what happens, and we have to break free and know, like, somebody's going to get upset. And that's actually a good thing, because if you're breaking social norms or, you know, organizational norms, and you see that people are getting agitated, you're on the right path. And it means that you're making something different.
You also used the word disruptor earlier, and could you tell us a little bit what you meant by that, and sort of what that, to a listener, what does it mean for a social worker or for anyone to be a disruptor?
I think it means to take something that people just accept and go against it, and to say, no, I don't think this is necessarily the way. For me personally, I don't think that medication is always the best path in treatment of mental health problems. And the reading that I've done really shows that that's true. And some people have just accepted that medication is the only way to treat a serious depression or anxiety. And I'm not saying that, that should be off the table, and I would never push somebody to do something that they feel like is right for them. But me personally, I wouldn't recommend it. It wouldn't be the first thing that I go to.
Right.
And I would encourage people to really do some research on whatever they might be prescribed. And so how can you say something audacious, and be a disruptor and be okay with that? And, I think there are a lot of different ways that we could do that. And I'm still exploring that myself and kind of trying to navigate that without making people feel bad for the choices that,
Sure,
they feel like,
sure.
Are best for them as well, because you do want to be respectful, obviously.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to leave us with as we wind down here? You want to leave listeners with some thoughts, thinking of what you've learned from your work? I see a couple different threads in your work. Certainly, this work around transition and transition into retirement, which we haven't talked about today.
Sure.
But also, some other life transitions that people go through, and how yoga and mind-body work relates to those life transitions and life challenges that people face, but then also this notion of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship and disruption, and there's a lot of threads.
Yes.
But if you've learned something from that work that you want to leave listeners with, some sort of parting thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, we didn't get too much into this because a lot of the social entrepreneurship that I do is based on online programs that I offer, and we often kind of a given in retirement planning is like, well, it's all about money. And when in your life have you ever planned for something only from a financial viewpoint? And the skills that we need as an older person, it's a distinct developmental stage in our life, and we need specific skills for that. And to help people, with that, I've seen that one of the fears is isolation and feeling really alone and not having meaning. And something that I do talk about in that program is how can you be an activist? How can you as an older person be an advocate for other people in your community or for yourself, and to be a disruptor yourself and really lead by example, and to do so in a way that helps people come together and see how fun it can be to create solutions in a way where, other people are involved and active, and do something different rather than just kind of meet your own needs and find purpose singularly in your own life. And I think that can be very inspiring. And one of the things, I'm obviously an advocate for mental health treatment, but one of the things I feel is that it's so isolated there. You're working usually one-on-one or with a couple or a family, and I find myself repeating a lot of the things I say to different people all day. I'm like, I wish I could get you all together and see that you're really not alone in this, and that when we get together, we feel a lot stronger. And I think that's really what I would want to leave people with, is that, when we can find that common ground and see a lot of the problems in our own life are mirrored in other people's, and when we can really, as social workers, get together and work, through the problems in our own profession, and as individuals, if we can help each other through that, it's the process feels so much more engaging and enjoyable.
Right.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on, because one of the reasons I love doing the show is because I like to learn. I'm a big person for education. I love to have guests on with different views. Like this was the first time I've ever really had a conversation on social entrepreneurship, and just to hear all the research that you've done on it, and the reasons for why you support this different way of thinking. I say different in terms of we haven't had these conversations a lot. It's not something that's popular in our profession. So I want to thank you for coming on and sharing this, because I always want people to share their voice. And so many times I hear, even in talking with new social workers or students, and they have these ideas, and it's sort of like, well, I think I'm the only one who thinks like that, so I'm just not going to say anything. And it's sort of being comfortable with sharing your voice, and being a disruptor. If you say if you see something that you're like, well, I really don't like how that's done, but I don't know how to change it, or I don't know what to do, or this is just how it's done and we just do it. It's nice to be able to have guests come on and sort of talk about and share their voice, share their ideas and their experiences and how you got to that and why you're at this point. It's really helpful, and I want to thank you for coming on and sharing this with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alix. We've been listening to an interview here live in the studio with Alix Foisy, who's a social worker, therapist, and yoga teacher and social entrepreneur here in the New York Capital Region. And it's really been wonderful talking with you, and we hope you'll come back and tell us about your future work at some point here on the Social Workers Talk Show.
I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Great. So thanks for being our guest. So, Alyssa, do you want to remind listeners again where they can find the Social Workers Talk Show outside of the airwaves?
Yes, the Social Worker Radio Talk Show is always archived. It's available on podcast. You follow us on our Facebook and Twitter pages. We're at Social Workers FM. We're also on iTunes, so you can definitely find us to download our segments.
Great. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to WCDB Albany, the Social Workers Live Radio Talk Show. We are here every Thursday from 10 a.m. to noon.
Yes.
And some weeks we're live in the studio with guests, and some weeks we play archival recordings of older episodes that you might want to hear more than once.
Yes.
So, or recommend to your friends to hear too. It's been...
You can listen to us every day.
That's right. That's right. We never get...
You'll never get sick of us, right?
Maybe. We shouldn't say that. But thanks for listening. We look forward to talking to you again.
Sounds good.
WCDB Albany.
You're listening to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.